Hello, and thank you for joining us today. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the UNESCO 1970 Convention against Illicit Trafficking. Blue Shield Germany is conducting interviews of notable members in the cultural heritage field as part of a social media campaign. The interviews will allow us to gain different international perspectives when discussing the fight against illicit trafficking and their approach to restitution of cultural property. My name is Dipanita Banik and I am from India. I'm pursuing a master degree in World Heritage Studies from Brandenburg Technical University, Cottbus, Germany. For today's session, we are now joined by Ms. Sophie Delepierre. She joined the UNESCO cultural sector in 2009, where she contributed in the revitalization of the convention on the means of prohibiting and preventing the illicit import, export, and transfer of ownership of cultural property 1970. In support of the program specialist, she drafted several working documents and legal notices on strategies to fight illicit trafficking of cultural goods. At present, she is the head of Heritage Protection and Capacity Building, Department of ECOM. Hello, Ms. Sophie Delepierre, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and having a conversation with us. My first question to you is, what is the current biggest challenge in the fight against the illicit trafficking of cultural heritage, and how can the implementation of UNESCO 1970 Convention be improved to respond to these challenges?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here with you today. And regarding the challenge faced by this traffic, I would say that, in fact, the traffic is quite linked to the society. And when society faces challenge, then this traffic adapts. So for the last decades, I would have said the online circulation of objects and the sales also through the use of social media by this traffic. Then I would say that is not a current, it's an ongoing one. I would say the armed conflicts that are making the cultural objects extremely vulnerable, especially on archaeological sites. Then I would say also that in the recent years, the climate changes change a lot. The situation because of the catastrophes and the emergency situation, which makes museums and sites really vulnerable. And now really recently, and it's really unfortunate, of course, the pandemic situation had an influence on the protection of cultural objects. I believe that the traffickers are using any vulnerability to attack this kind of cultural heritage, and then I believe that there are the most challenges faced by cultural property protection. And regarding the implementation of the convention, well, this is also an excellent question, and I believe that, of course, at international level, we are pushing the ratification of the cultural convention. That is important to have like a uniformity at international level. But then the main point, it's implementation. So in fact, the answer is in the question. The most important thing is the implementation. First through the transposition in national laws, and then the application of the provision of the convention that sometimes are quite missing. So I would, if the 50th anniversary can push for more political efforts from the responsibility of the states and then the national services, I think it would be a really nice success of the anniversary.
Yes, I think I agree on that point with you, because illicit trafficking is not specifically bilateral, but it is multilateral. And in that case, I also believe that every state party in the UN should, ratify the convention, so that gives it a stronger push and makes it more effective. Thank you. I would move on to the second question, which is that since you are the head of the Heritage Protection and Capacity Building Department of ECOM, and the organization has recently released recommendations to ensure cultural heritage security, especially during the lockdown period, how has the current situation with a global ongoing pandemic impacted the museum landscape with regards to the safety of the objects held in these museums? And what does ECOM recommend as the most important steps for the security of these objects in the museums?
Well, of course, as I said in my previous answer, the current situation made by the pandemic and the followed lockdown has, of course, impacted the museum. Some surveys made by UNESCO and ICOM confirmed that 95% of museums in the world have been closed, and quickly closed. In fact, the museum professionals, so the institution, closed in a few days or hours. So the safeguarding of the collection is still their duty, but they have to take into account the situation, which can be extremely different from a country to another. And in ICOM, we try to be as close as possible of our network. We have nearly 50,000 museum professional ICOM members through the world. And the situation is very different. And we try to be as much as there for there, in fact. We wanted to be close to them and also really useful. So we try to, with the expert that we have, to publish some basic recommendation. Why basic? Because, as I said, the situation is extremely different from a country in another, and even sometimes in the same country, from a museum, for example, a national museum or a regional museum. So we published several recommendations, for example, regarding the conservation that we made with our with ICOM-CC, which is our expert committee. And we try to share as much as possible with the network through the website. And we made several of these. Also for the virtual activities, for example, when we're trying to reach our public without them being in the museum itself. And yes, you mentioned it, we also published some recommendations regarding security. And that is because, of course, as I said, as pandemic is also a challenge, then it's making the objects that are already vulnerable even more vulnerable.
Even more vulnerable, yes.
Yes, exactly. And some museums that were closed and maybe without, any security measure were an easy target. And I don't say that the museum that were in the newspaper were easy target, but we heard about some theft. And so we decided to react, because we always want to use the lesson we learn for better after. And so we are really working close, for example, to INTERPOL with the work of art unit, especially. We spoke with them and we decided to prepare together some recommendation. So they're on the website, so I will not describe everything. It's easy. But of course, we wanted to stress some points. For example, the adaptation of process, because of course, some museums have already emergency plans, and we wanted them to adapt as soon as possible, because the situation is really strange. And for example, when I say adapt, it's about, for example, the security guards, about the person in the museum, because some professionals choose to stay in their museum, not moving anymore. And that's an example as another. And it's really important that they check the process, for example, for intruder system, the CCTV, the person that were authorized to enter the museum, and to make sure that the list were updated, the list of contact. Also close communication with the police, especially if there is a special unit, as in certain countries they have a special police for illicit traffic project. So close contact with them, also maybe see with in the area there are other cultural institutions that are a target, for example, libraries, archives, social media place, theater, you know, any other place that are vulnerable for thieves, and that can be that can the curators can go together and trying to have like a global check of the situation in the same area. And also the involvement, when it's possible, for example, the involvement of the neighbors, you know, as the museum is maybe without any sufficient checking, surveillance, we could also see with the neighbors if they can be the ear or the eyes of their museum, because we generally see that the local population are really, really want to help, also to protect. And then sometimes also we ask them to be there also to help the curators and the staff. So yes, every little tips like this, from the most technical one regarding, as I said, intruder system, or on the basical one, involve the local population. You know, we are trying to make as much as possible recommendation for our network. And we were really happy here to work with Interpol. We have great connection with them and great relation. So we made already projects together. So it was, in fact, quite easy to publish quickly these recommendations that have been well received by the field.
Since you mentioned ECOM's collaboration with Interpol, I would like to ask you that how can museums and museum professionals help Interpol in their fight against illicit trafficking?
Well, in fact, regarding the specific cooperation between museums and police, first it depends from countries to countries, and then it's not only Interpol. Of course, Interpol is a really important actor, and with UNESCO, with UNIDROIT, with the World Customs Organization and ECOM, we are really, you know, maintaining close cooperation. But what I would like to say is, when there is a police, for example, a specialized police in a country, is really like an asset to have in their pocket, you know, the name of a few museum experts, which can help to identify objects or authentified object. So generally, it's not something public. I have to say that people like to have some discretion on this, and I understand it's the work of the police, it needs that. But sometimes also we have some public information on it, and I believe it's really important that the public knows about this involvement of the museum community. And for example, if I can show you one example, it was on the news 1 week ago, I believe. It was the British Museum who announced that they identify Iraqi objects sold online, and they have an excellent department of the Middle East that are extremely involved in the fight against illicit traffic, and they raised the flag to the police, and after, you know, the process, the object was seized and to be sent back to Iraq. So that is a public information. So I'm really happy to share the news, but there are many other situations where that we don't know, and I believe it's normal, but the public should know that the museum professionals are really involved in the fight against illicit traffic, even on a very discreet level, and sometimes it's extremely public. For example, with the red list, that is a tool that is made by ICOM members and museum experts to help the police and the customs and the auction houses and the private person. Any person who acquire an object can check on the red list, and that is also a part of the museum world efforts to to be there to fight this traffic.
Like very rightly said, that museum professionals need to work in close collaboration with the local population and also sensitize the local and the regional police so that they can collaborate with Interpol in return, and this menace could be checked at some point.
Absolutely. We are generally also saying that, for example, when there is a theft in a museum, we say communicate it extremely quickly to the police. Then the police will inform the Bureau Central National of Interpol in each country. And then the information go to Interpol headquarters, because like this, we can register the object in the Interpol Works of Art database of stolen objects. And that is extremely important to fight the illicit. We need to know the situation. We need to have the information. So that is another part that we are pushing at ICOM, and is when there is a theft, communicated as soon as possible with the right documentation, like that we can put it in the international database. Yes.
Thank you. My next question to you is about the ECOM Red List itself. So we know that these are great tools designed to help police, custom officials, as well as dealers to identify objects that are most susceptible to illicit trafficking. So is ECOM currently working on developing new red lists?
Yes, of course. We are always, as you said, it's a successful tool. We have now 17 red lists. One of it is Libya. It's behind me. And the first one was published in 2000, because in fact, when we were speaking about the convention, we asked, the person dealing with the circulation to exercise due diligence, to be sure that the objects are legally on the market. But it's difficult sometimes to know if this type or this type of object are okay. So these red lists that's not stolen objects. All the objects in the red list are somewhere in a museum.
Right.
The point is to say, okay, you want to acquire an object, you need to be sure that the circulation is correct. If it's in the red list, then be careful, because the object is protected in a country. Yes, the main message of red list is, if it's an object looking like one of the red list, be careful. Be careful, because the object is protected. We don't say that it is stolen, we say it's protected. So it needs to circulate correctly with the rightful documentation. And also it's really helpful for police who see some object and need to know which one is it's protected or not. Same for the customs.
So it is like a reference list for them.
Yes, the beginning of a process to check. Let's say like this. It's participation of the check.
So it will raise an alarm.
Exactly. Some people say it's a red flag. I'm okay with that. I think it's a right one. So it have been, I received, and my predecessor also received some, good news about this type of lists, because it's helped in the identification of objects. Really recently, it was, we heard that the Carabinieri, the TPC, so the specialized police in Italy, the Carabinieri TPC, they used one of the red lists also to identify objects. I think it was also for Iraq. And so it's helping the process. I believe that in the fight against illicit trafficking, there is no one tool that is the best for everything. And I'm certain that it's the addition of operational tools and text and people and experts that help in the process. Red list is one of these tools. To answer your last question, yes, we are preparing a new one, which is expected to be released next year. It's a regional one this time. It's not a national, it's a regional one, and it will be dedicated to Southeast Europe. So we are currently working with 10 countries together to work to identify shared cultural heritage, and that is particularly vulnerable in this region. and help to say to the other countries of the world, if you see some object from this region, be careful because they are protecting in their states. So
yes, it is of course interesting, and I think it's a good idea to have a list that covers an entire region, because regional collaboration is so important in checking these trafficking at different points. And so having an overview of a region as a susceptible region for trafficking is in fact a very interesting and a good way to take this initiative forward.
Yes, I completely agree with you. Regional and even international cooperation is absolutely fantastic and necessary, in fact. And if I can add that, is that we are, as I said, working closely with UNESCO, UNIDROIT, INTERPOL, the National Specialized Police. And for example, in this region, there are several workshops in 2014 and between 2014 and 2018, made by especially the Carabinieri in the region to raise capacity building and awareness raising. And the red list is like one of the results of this workshop, and also other workshops made by ICOM and other partners that are also really important. And you saw it's the fact that we made some workshops over there. We saw a necessity. We found some really dedicated experts ready to be involved to prepare the red list, that we are now capable to prepare one and to publish one and to have sponsor and this kind of thing. So it's like a big machine for such a tool at the end, but you know, to have a simple tool, it's a lot of work. But after, we are really happy when we hear like success story or restitution, and we are museum community is happy to be part of it. Again, I don't say it's the unique and final tool, absolutely not. It's part of it, and the museum experts are really, really happy when they feel like they have been part of it, and I think they can be proud of them, and proud to be part of the international protection of cultural objects, even it's an object coming from another country. It's like respect from each other. It's like our common heritage at the end of the humanity. So we can feel this wish to be part of the international fight, and I think they can be really proud of them.
Of course, this involves a lot of dedication, compassion, and respect for each other's cultural heritage. Only then such a massive and gigantic task could be undertaken.
Absolutely.
I have one last question before we conclude. That is, why is the UNESCO 1970 Convention on the means of prohibiting and preventing illicit import and export and transfer of ownership of cultural property so important to you personally?
Well, in fact, as I said at the beginning of this interview, it's an international traffic. If it's an international traffic, we need international tools to answer it. Part of the international cooperation to fight, it's the International Convention. So I usually say that the 1970 UNESCO Convention and the UNIDROIT Convention on stolen or illegally exported cultural objects of 1995, which is the two main conventions at the end. For me, I always say they are the two pillars of the international cooperation. And on these pillars, we can have some foundation, some roots. And on this, we can construct the operational tools and the international cooperation, I mean, on the global level. So without that, we would not be able to have such good, strong basis to work on it and to develop, you know, such kind of documentation or some databases or some network on some workshops. We need this convention, we need the ratification, we need the states being involved, being responsible, being open to work together on this topic, which is more and more on the international table, I would say. So for me, yes, that's the goal of the convention, is to give us at international level strong basis to construct on it. So that's why the UNESCO 70 Convention is so important.
Yes.
And I also really respect the work done by my predecessor to draft this text, to fight for this text. We also recently celebrate the 25 years of the UNIDROIT Convention. So we were recalled, you know, the origin of it, the why of it. And when you read the preparatory works and the thinking, the brainstorming of the expert at the time, so many explanation and, you know, conversation and discussion. There are so many points that are still really currently completely right. So I believe it's not all text, they are still really coherent today, really useful today, and we need absolutely to defend them, to be sure that they are, you know, we need to fight for them to be able to have this famous basic foundation we need to construct and fight properly the illicit traffic of cultural objects.
Yes, so the convention was written at a point in the past, but it is still relevant today because the issue is still relevant, and it is a very foundational or sort of pillar for tackling this ongoing menace around the world. Yes. Ms. Delepierre, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. And it was really a pleasure to have you here with us. And I would like to request the viewers to visit the links provided below the video to watch more such interviews with international organizations and actors in the heritage field to explore their diverse perspectives on illicit trafficking. Thank you.